Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and I'm taking care of business. Joining me today is Franco Terrazzano, who is Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Thanks for joining us today, Franco.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Well, let's talk about vaccination taxes. That's been the talk of the news media here in the last couple of weeks since Quebec threw that kind of up in the air and suggested that's a possibility of, a lot of people aren't using the word tax, but it's a tax on the people who are unvaccinated. You have a column going out today that talks about this being a Pandora's box. Tell us a little bit of your concerns of what's happening with this.
First, I am so glad, Mario, that you use the word tax. You have some of these politicians in Quebec, they're trying to call this a health contribution, but make no mistake about it, this is a tax, and it would be a new tax on top of a whole raft of taxes that we already pay, right? Income taxes, business taxes, sales taxes, property taxes, payroll taxes, you name it, taxpayers pay it. And this is such a slippery slope that could really open up the floodgates of new types of taxes. And I can't believe that we have to say it, but we are not going to tax our way out of a pandemic. And that's why when you have some of these politicians and bureaucrats trying to divide Canadians, trying to target certain taxpayers, we believe that all Canadians, whether you're vaccinated or whether you're unvaccinated, need to unite against this new tax.
So, when you're looking at this, one of the things they're talking about is, the strain it puts on the healthcare system and all that. But what is not part of the discussion is the fact that, wherever you are on the two sides of things, right? Whether you're pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine, the point is the people who are not still pay taxes that support the healthcare system. And this is what I don't understand is how they can even think about that.
That's right. I mean, all Canadians are paying a ton of taxes like we just talked about. And what about those unvaccinated Canadians who would be forced to pay this tax? What if they don't go to the hospital? Would they get a rebate? It really seems like some of these, what was thrown out there was half-baked. And I think we also have to point out where is the accountability on our politicians and our bureaucrats, right? Even before the pandemic, taxpayers in Canada were paying an arm and a leg for the government healthcare system. We knew about the flaws. We knew that if you compare us with other industrialized countries, we ranked pretty low on crucial indicators like acute care beds per capita, like doctors per capita. And Mario, let's take the taxpayer lens at this. We've been going through this pandemic for nearly 2 full years now. The federal government has spent more than $500 billion on the pandemic. You look at healthcare budget in the provinces. Well, in total, it's nearly $400 billion since the beginning of 2020. So I have 2 questions. I think we all need these 2 questions answered. Number one, how many hundreds of billions of dollars do taxpayers need to pay before our healthcare system isn't on the brink of collapse? And number 2, well, when are these politicians and bureaucrats who have been receiving their 6-figure taxpayer-funded salaries, when are they going to be held accountable for not coming up with better solutions to fix healthcare capacity?
You used the word half-baked, but you know what? Unless I've missed something, our prime minister hasn't ruled it out and hasn't said, specifically no to that idea. And, he has been on record in an interview, basically, slamming the unvaccinated people. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that this could land nationally.
Oh, that's what we're so concerned about. And we're also concerned about some other provincial premiers looking for new ways to tax Canadians to start thinking about this type of proposal as well. And that's why we say, whether you're vaccinated, whether you're unvaccinated, you need to fight this. I mean, particularly if you are vaccinated, because today you have some politicians that want the unvaccinated to pay more. Well, who are they going to go after tomorrow? Right? Let's say you put a little bit too much butter on your popcorn. Are you going to have to pay a tax? Let's say you're like me and every Christmas you eat way too much and you put on too much weight. Well, you're going to have to write a check to the government.
That
But what
kind-
about this? Yeah, exactly. And what about this one? Here's a serious one. What if your kid falls off their bike, trying a new jump? They have to go to the hospital. Well, are they going to have to pay a tax bill when they get their stitches? Right? This is opening up Pandora's box. This is such a slippery slope that all taxpayers need to fight against.
You know, there's the old saying, right, about two things are certain, death and taxes. And, you know, are we at the point of being taxed to death in this country?
You know what's also so alarming about this new tax that's coming out of Quebec is that it's following a clear trend. And it seems like whenever governments are trying to tackle a problem, their only answer is to hammer Canadians with higher taxes, right?
Yeah.
Politicians want Canadians to drive fewer trucks, so they hammer us with a carbon tax. When the carbon tax doesn't work, when emissions continue to go up, they hammer us with higher carbon taxes. We have these sky high housing prices here in Canada, as we talked about. Well, these bureaucrats, their so-called solution is to fund a report with our tax dollars, dreaming up a new tax on homeowners. So this is following a clear trend where it seems like the only answer that our politicians and bureaucrats have is more taxes on overtaxed Canadians.
Here's the opening of the Pandora's box, Franco. Okay, we're at a point now where we're approaching 2 years of doing this. What are the future of lockdowns in this country? Do you think that we're going to get to the point that government and health officials basically throw up their hands and say, you know what? There's nothing we can do about this anymore. We've tried everything. We've tried lockdowns how many times? We've tried vaccinations how many times? But variants keep coming up and up. And, does it get to the point where the lockdown as a stopgap measure to stop the virus become a thing of the past? Should it become a thing of the past?
That's a good and tough question, and I'm not sure I have the answer to that. What has really concerned me as someone who is the taxpayer watchdog is just how many hundreds of billions of dollars that our provincial and federal governments have been spending on healthcare and on the pandemic over the last 2 years, and how they haven't really taken accountability for the fact that they haven't been able to come up with solutions to improve our government healthcare system, despite having 2 years, despite these hundreds of billions of dollars. Mario, one thing that we have been talking about is that what we're seeing here with the massive amount of money that the federal government is spending, because they're really picking up the bulk of the tab here when it comes to the subsidies for workers and businesses that are being locked down by provincial premiers, is there's a bit of a perverse incentive here where premiers are not thinking about the full cost of their lockdowns because the federal government is picking up the bulk of the tab with its credit card bill. And that's why the Canadian Taxpayers Federation has called on the federal government to stop its pandemic subsidies.
Yeah, exactly. Well, always a pleasure chatting with you, Franco. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
All right, super. Franco Terrazzano, who is Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I'm Mario Toneguzzi. This has been Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.